Hello, my name is Henry Abramson. I'm a historian, and I spend most of my professional energy thinking about the long history of the Jewish people. As a person, however, I'm a father of a son in a combat unit in the IDF, and another son who recently made Aliyah with intention to join the IDF. And my wife and I are constantly reading about Israel and thinking about what is going on there and desperately praying for all of this to end soon and end in a positive way. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to speak to other parents, and I hope that I can share something with you that helps me get through this very difficult time for our family. You know, it says at the beginning of Tractate Megillah in the Talmud that Reish Lakish says, Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu makeh es Yisrael ela im ken bor lehem refuah tchila. This is the source of the proverbial statement that Hashem never sends any kind of affliction to the Jewish people without first creating the remedy for that affliction, without first creating the cure for the illness, without first creating the solution to the problem. And I think in terms of what's going on right now, you know, what could possibly be that cure for the horrible Makkah of October 7th? Because we continue to be buffeted by the implications of that horrific attack on the Jewish people. We continue to be mourning for the losses of our young, brave men and women in uniform, chas v'shalom. We continue to mourn for those who were taken into captivity, and later we learned that they were cruelly murdered. And we continue to agonize over the men, women, and children who still remain in unspeakable, cruel conditions in captivity in Gaza. We have the huge disruptions of Jews being forced from their homes in the south and in the north, the economic disruptions. I mean, there's so many things that we're still reeling from as we cope with this horrific stress. And I wonder, you know, we see the Makkah, but where is the refuah? So one of the occupational hazards of being a historian is that dates tend to reverberate throughout history. And, I use dates from my PIN numbers and all kinds of things like that because you just have to remember things by numbers. And there are certain events in history which are so big that we can't even think of a word for them. We actually end up using the date. Like, for example, 9/11 of 2001. We don't know how to term that horrific attack on the United States of America, so we just simply call it by the date. The British have the same thing with the attack on their transit system on July of 2005. They call it simply 7/7. And so we too have simply October 7th. Until we think of a name to describe this, that's where we are. But that makes me think of another October 7th that is seared in my historical memory, and that is an unusual moment of Jewish heroism that initially went almost unrecognized. This, of course, was the revolt of the Sonderkommando against the Nazis in 1944 in the very ninth circle of hell in Auschwitz. The Sonderkommando were the most degraded, most abused prisoners of the Nazis who were used for the horrific task of having to process the bodies of other Jews through the gas chambers and the crematoria. And we know about this particular doomed but highly symbolic revolt, which actually shut down the crematoria, allowing time for the Allies to get in there. But the records of the perspective of the Jews who participated in that revolt are recorded in the amazing and horrific writings of a man named Zalman Gradovsky. He was one of these Sonderkommando, and he wrote about his Holocaust memoirs in little fragments, little bits of paper whenever he'd get something, and he literally buried those bits of paper all over Auschwitz in the actual ashes of Jews burned in the crematoria. He figured that at some point in history, people would come back and dig up those ashes, and they would find these notes when he described what he went through. He described how there was a turning point for him that occurred in March of 1944, when there was a large group of women from Czechoslovakia, Jewish women, who were to be gassed all at once. And it was such a large affair that the Nazis had actually invited senior officers to participate in watching the murder of these women. And they humiliated them and stripped them and forced them to march naked into a central room. And the Sonderkommando were there, standing with their backs to the Nazi officers, watching this large group of Jewish women. All of a sudden, to Gradowski's amazement And to the Nazis' horror, something very unusual happened. I'm going to read directly from his memoirs that were discovered after the war. In the large bunker stand thousands of victims waiting for death. All at once, spontaneously, a song rings out. The clique of superior officers stand transfixed. They cannot understand, they cannot grasp. How is it possible that there, in that bunker, in the heart of the grave, on the threshold of extinction, in the last moments of life, that people, instead of moaning, instead of weeping over their young lives about to be snuffed out, can raise their voices in song? The melody of the song does not let them rest. It troubles them, shatters the certainty they felt up to now. A new song of faith and courage comes pouring out of their hearts. The mass now sings the national anthem. They sing the Hatikva. It's an amazing description of something that turned Gradowski around. He said, if these women who knew they were going to their deaths could stand up to the Nazis, if they could be stiff-necked at this moment, then certainly he and the other Sonderkommando could as well. And that was the genesis of the revolt of that heroic October 7th. And I believe this is an example of the refuah that comes before the Makkah. That the heroism of those women and the heroism of the Sonderkommando, including Zalman Gradowski, that represents the stiff-neckedness of the Jewish people. That they refused to give up. They refused to abandon the captives. They refused to abandon their own security and their own right to exist in their ancestral land. That's really the refuah that was created before the Makkah. May we all have the merit to see this crisis end speedily, with the safe return of all our young men and women, with a safe return of all of the hostages to their families speedily in our day. And may we all merit to see the coming Mashiach b'mehera b'yameinu. Thank you very much for watching.